The lawyer's office smelled faintly of old paper and burnt coffee. I sat in a creaking chair, my hands folded tight in my lap, trying not to notice the way Linda's eyes flicked toward me. She leaned into her cousin, whispering just loud enough, "She's greedy. Watch, she'll try to take it all." The word greedy floated in the air like smoke, choking me before a single page was read. I wanted to speak, to remind them who had sat by my sister's hospital bed every night, who had driven through snowstorms with a bag of groceries, who had paid for prescriptions when the insurance wouldn't. But the words stuck in my throat. Mr. Daniels, the lawyer, cleared his voice and lifted the first envelope. The paper crackled as he broke the seal. The room hushed. Outside, I could hear traffic passing, horns muffled through the glass, a world going on as if my dignity weren't hanging by a thread. He read the first will, line by line, his voice steady, official. Every asset listed, jewelry, savings, the house on Maple Street, assigned to someone else, not a single mention of me. I could feel the eyes circling, the smirks hiding behind folded hands. Linda's smile widened. "Told you," she mouthed. I stared at the table, at the paper cup of coffee gone cold in front of me. My sister's handwriting was nowhere on those pages, just the impersonal type of the court. My chest ached, the word greedy echoing again and again. Then Mr. Daniel stopped. He set the first envelope aside and reached for another, smaller and sealed tight. The seal shimmered under the light, inked initials across the flap. "There is a second envelope," he said, his voice carrying a weight that pulled every eye forward. "Let me tell you what those cousins didn't see. For 10 years, my sister Ruth's life had been shrinking, room by room, until the hospital became her home. I was the one beside her, steady as a clock. Most mornings started before sunrise. I'd fill a thermos with weak diner coffee, tug on my old coat, and drive across town. At the hospital, nurses would nod, "You're back again." I learned which vending machine gave out warm soup cups, which hallway lights buzzed louder at night. I kept crossword puzzles in my bag for Ruth, though she only half finished them before sleep pulled her under. Bills stacked like bricks. Prescriptions that insurance refused to cover. $87 for one bottle, $212 for another. I clipped coupons for groceries, stretched casseroles across 3 nights, skipped new shoes for myself so I could hand the cashier my card without shame. Some nights, I stared at my bank app, the numbers dropping, and whispered, "We'll find a way." Still, there were moments of light. On her better days, Ruth and I sat by the hospital window talking about the porch swing we'd grown up on, how we used to sing hymns until our mother called us in. She'd smile faintly, and for a few minutes it felt like we were girls again. Meanwhile, the rest of the family stayed distant. Linda visited once, breezing in with a bouquet, posting a selfie, visiting Aunt Ruth, then breezing out before the flowers drooped. The cousins sent group texts, more about who'd get the silverware than how Ruth was really doing. I don't say this to paint myself as a saint. I was tired, bone tired. I missed birthdays, skipped Christmas gatherings. Some nights I sat in my car outside the hospital, forehead against the wheel, wondering how much more I had to give. But when Ruth whispered, "Don't leave me alone," I always walked back in. So when they called me greedy in that lawyer's office, when Linda smirked as if I were plotting to steal, it cut deep. Because I knew what I had given, what I had lost, what they had chosen to ignore. And the truth is, Ruth knew it too. Linda was the loudest voice in the room, though she didn't need to be. Her red nails tapped against her phone as she whispered, "Greedy, greedy," like it was a chorus. Linda wanted the Maple Street house, not because she loved Aunt Ruth's garden or the creak of the porch swing, but because she saw dollar signs. She'd been in debt for years, chasing after handbags and vacations she couldn't afford. To her, inheritance was a shortcut, not a legacy. The cousins were quieter, but their eyes told on them. Henry adjusted his tie again and again, his knee bouncing as if the chair burned beneath him. He wanted Ruth's jewelry set. He'd bragged at Thanksgiving that it would look good in a safe deposit box. Mary, clutching a church bulletin in her purse, was less greedy than fearful. She worried about being left out, about status at Sunday service if the will didn't name her. Even Mr. Daniels, the lawyer, carried a layer beyond his steady voice. He had represented Ruth for years, seen her decline, and quietly admired the loyalty he watched from me. I saw it in his eyes that morning. Measured, but sympathetic. He knew more than he was saying. And then there was Mrs. Bennet, my neighbor. She sat in the back row, coat buttoned to her chin, a silent witness. She had seen me haul groceries through snow, seen the porch light burning past midnight. She wasn't family, but she knew the truth. In that office, greed, fear, duty, and respect swirled together like smoke. Everyone carried a motive. Everyone waited to see how the pages would fall, and soon the first crack would show. The first fracture appeared at the funeral, small enough that someone else might have missed it. I didn't. The fellowship hall smelled of coffee urns and ham sandwiches. Casserole dishes lined the counter, each marked with masking tape and black marker. From Mrs. Jacobs, from the choir people murmured over folded obituary clippings, trading old stories about Ruth. I stood by the punch bowl when Linda walked in, her heels clicking sharp against the tile. She smiled wide, a little too wide, and called across the room, "Don't worry, Aunt Margaret's got the house keys already." Laughter rippled, quick and nervous. Henry smirked into his cup. Even Mary chuckled softly, her fingers tightening around that ever-present church bulletin. My hand froze midair. The metal of the ladle burned cold against my palm. I forced a smile, the kind you paste on for politeness, and said nothing. But inside, my stomach tightened. Later, by the coat rack, I overheard Linda whispering to a cousin. "The lawyer's office said there's just one envelope. She'll be cut out clean." Her voice was smug, like she was already measuring drapes for a house that wasn't hers. I wanted to step forward to demand where she'd heard it, but the words stuck. Instead, I slipped into my old coat, the one patched at the elbow, and walked home in the cold night air. My breath fogged, the street lamps flickered, and every step felt heavier. I told myself it was nothing, just talk, just family chatter. But as I unlocked my door and saw the stack of medical receipts on the table, each one I had paid, I knew better. Jokes don't leave bruises. And soon, the proof would. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of lemon polish and old dust. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, striping the conference table where the first envelope lay waiting. Mr. Daniels adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began to read. His voice was calm, official, but each word landed like a stone. Jewelry assigned to Henry, the silver tea set to Mary, the Maple Street house, split between Linda and her cousins, savings bonds, distributed evenly to remaining relatives. Not a single mention of me. I sat very still, staring at the grain of the wood under my folded hands. Around me, chairs creaked as relatives leaned back with small smiles. Linda's phone buzzed once on the table, and she tilted it just enough for me to see a text bubble. "Told you she'd be cut out." Heat rose up my neck. I gripped my paper cup of coffee so tight it bent in my hand, lukewarm liquid spilling onto the table. Henry smirked, pretending to cough. Mary looked at me, then quickly down at her lap, cheeks flushed. Linda leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. "Greedy," she hissed. Even Ruth knew it. Mr. Daniels paused, his eyes flicking toward me. For just a second, sympathy flashed across his face. Then he set the papers down. "This document," he said carefully, "was drafted 8 years ago. 8 years. Before the hospital nights, before the unpaid bills, before I had given up nearly everything to care for Ruth. I swallowed hard. The receipts back home, the $87 bottle, the $212 prescription, the hospital parking passes stacked like a deck of cards, rose in my mind, proof of what I had given, now erased in black ink on an official page. Linda sat back smugly, satisfied. To her, the matter was closed, but Mr. Daniels didn't close the file. He folded the first will carefully, placed it aside, and reached for something else in his briefcase. A smaller envelope sealed tight, initials scrawled across the flap. The room shifted, chairs scraped. Even Linda stopped smiling. "There is another document," Mr. Daniels said, voice steady. "Your sister left further instructions." Mr. Daniels held the smaller envelope with care, the way a priest might lift a chalice. The flap bore Ruth's initials scrawled in shaky ink, dated just 6 months ago. He slid a letter opener beneath the seal. The paper crackled, sharp as thunder in the quiet room. "This," he said, "was prepared privately with witnesses. It supplements the first document." The air shifted. Linda stiffened, her painted nails tapping against the table. Henry frowned, his tie suddenly too tight. Mary clutched her church bulletin like it could shield her. I leaned forward, heart hammering. Mr. Daniels read, "To my sister Margaret, who gave up her nights, her savings, her strength, and her years to care for me. You were my comfort when I had none. For that, I leave instructions separate and clear." A hush fell. I caught the faint ticking of the office clock, the hiss of the radiator in the corner. The world outside, traffic, horns, faded. Only Ruth's words remained. Mr. Daniels continued, "The Maple Street house is to pass solely to Margaret. Likewise, the remaining savings accounts. These are not gifts of greed, but recognition of sacrifice." Gasps rippled. Linda slammed her hand against the table. "That's not fair." She manipulated Ruth. Mr. Daniels' brow furrowed. "These documents are notarized, witnessed, and valid under state law. The signatures are here." He tapped the page. Blue ink gleamed under the light. I sat back slowly, tears stinging my eyes. For weeks, humiliation had eaten at me, the whispers of greedy echoing louder than truth. Now, in Ruth's handwriting and the lawyer's voice, justice had begun to speak. Mrs. Bennet shifted in her seat at the back, nodding once. She had seen the late-night groceries, the porch light that never went dark. Her quiet presence anchored me. Linda tried again, her voice shrill. "This can't stand. She doesn't deserve it." I lifted my chin, steady. "I never asked for a penny," I said softly. But Ruth knew the truth. The room bristled, arguments rising. But inside me, something had changed. I was no longer pleading to be seen. I was ready to defend what was right, because the second envelope was only the beginning. The room erupted. Linda shot to her feet, chair legs scraping the floor. "This is outrageous!" Aunt Ruth was sick. She didn't know what she was signing. Henry muttered, "There's no way she left the house entirely to Margaret." Mary's lips moved silently, her knuckles white around the bulletin clutched in her lap. Mr. Daniels didn't flinch. He slid another document across the table, his finger tapping the notarized seal. "These are witness statements." Ruth signed this supplement in their presence. Her intent is clear. But Linda wasn't listening. She pulled out her phone, waving it like a weapon. "I have messages from last year. Ruth told me she wanted things divided fairly. Look." She jabbed at the screen, but the screen stayed dark. No evidence, just noise. I sat quietly, watching the storm swirl. My hands rested on the envelope Ruth had trusted to speak for her. My throat burned with unshed words. Then Mr. Daniels pulled yet another sheet from his folder. "There's more." Linda froze. "More," he read. "To avoid confusion, I declare the previous draft of my will void. Any attempt to substitute names or alter roles is invalid." He looked directly at Linda. "Ruth wrote this after learning certain relatives had tried to interfere." Whispers shot through the room like sparks. Someone gasped. Henry leaned toward Mary, hissing. "She tried to rewrite it. Replace Margaret's name with ours." Mary shook her head, eyes wide. My pulse roared in my ears. Replace. Not only erased, replaced. Mr. Daniels lifted a seating chart draft from Ruth's files. In Ruth's handwriting, my name had been crossed out, then rewritten firmly above, Margaret Hill only. Beneath, in different ink, someone had scribbled, "Divide among cousins." My stomach knotted. The evidence was clear. They had tried to overwrite me, not just cut me out. I remembered those nights in the hospital, the vending machine soup, the sound of Ruth's faint breathing as machines beeped, and all the while Linda had been scheming, not visiting, not helping, but planning to erase me from the story altogether. The betrayal flared hot in my chest. Fury, not just at Linda, but at myself for letting their whispers eat at me for so long. Across the room, Mrs. Bennet straightened in her seat. I saw Margaret every night, bringing groceries, walking home under the street lamps. If Ruth wanted fairness, she found it here. Her voice was steady, carrying weight no one could deny. Linda's face flushed scarlet. "You don't know anything," she snapped. But her words sounded brittle now, hollow against the paper trail in front of us. The air in the office had shifted. This wasn't a family quarrel anymore. It was a conspiracy laid bare, with documents, witnesses, and signatures pointing one way. And all of it was leading to the day of exposure, where truth would stand in the light and shame would have no place to hide. The office was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking above the door. Mr. Daniels laid the disputed drafts aside and placed Ruth's final supplement in the center of the table. The paper gleamed under the fluorescent light, every word clear, every signature firm. "This is the controlling document," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "It is valid, witnessed, and legally binding. Ruth's final instructions cannot be challenged." He turned the page so everyone could see. Across the top, Ruth's handwriting trembled but steady enough. For Margaret. The Maple Street house, the savings, the accounts, all listed in my name. Linda surged forward, snatching for the page, but Mr. Daniels' hand came down hard. "Touch that again and I'll call security." His calmness sharpened into steel. Henry muttered, "It can't be." His tie hung loose now, his face pale. Mary shook her head, whispering a prayer under her breath, bulletin crumpling in her fists. Mrs. Bennet stood, her coat falling open. I saw Margaret there. Every night. I saw her leave with tired eyes and come back again the next morning. If anyone doubts Ruth's intent, I am witness. Gasps swept the room. A murmur rolled through the back row. Neighbors, church friends, people Ruth had trusted to sit in. They nodded, whispered, and the tide turned. I sat straighter, the knot in my chest loosening. For weeks I had been branded greedy, whispered about, humiliated. But here, in black ink and Ruth's own words, the truth stood taller than their lies. Linda's voice cracked. "She doesn't deserve it. Ruth told me." "She told you nothing," Mr. Daniels snapped. He tapped the blue ink seals. "These speak louder than gossip." The room felt heavier, as if gravity itself had shifted. The cousins slumped. Linda collapsed back into her chair, her face flushed scarlet, her phone slipping from her hand onto the carpet with a dull thud. I breathed in deeply. The scent of lemon polish, the faint hum of the radiator, the scrape of Mrs. Bennet's chair, every sound rooted me. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't erased. For the first time, I looked Linda in the eye. "Greed isn't measured in who gets written down," I said softly. "It's measured in who shows up when it counts." Her lips trembled, but she had no answer. The humiliation was hers now, not mine. By the time Mr. Daniels closed the file, the verdict was etched into more than paper. It was carved into the memory of everyone in that room. And by the next morning, the fallout would be impossible to ignore. By morning, word had already spread. Small towns don't keep secrets, especially not the kind that unfold in a lawyer's office. At the diner, whispers followed Linda as she slid into a booth with Henry. "That's the one who tried to fight her aunt," someone muttered, not quietly enough. The waitress poured coffee with a stiff smile, setting the cup down harder than usual. Back at Mr. Daniels' office, official letters went out. Copies of Ruth's final supplement stamped and sealed, filed with the probate court. The earlier draft marked void, every amendment by meddling hands erased. The Maple Street house, the accounts, the bonds, legally mine. Legal punch landed heavier when Mr. Daniels sent a cease and desist to Linda, warning her against further slander. Any attempt to contest without standing, the letter read, will be considered frivolous and punishable by fees. Henry, usually so loud at family gatherings, barely lifted his eyes at church that Sunday. Mary clutched her bulletin tighter than ever, but this time she didn't sit near Linda. Even family had turned wary. I sat on my porch, the autumn air cool against my face, as Mrs. Bennet brought over a pie still warm from her oven. "Justice tastes better when it's shared," she said with a smile, and for the first time in months, I laughed. Inside, Ruth's words still rested on the table, framed in black ink and notarized stamps. Not greed, recognition, proof written not in whispers, but in law. The sting of their accusations hadn't vanished, but relief had finally arrived, steady as the creak of Earl's old chair beneath me. Justice had spoken loud, and now all that remained was something quieter. A week later, I found myself back on the porch, the same spot Ruth and I had shared countless evenings. The maple leaves had begun to turn, their colors flickering gold and red in the late afternoon light. I held a steaming cup of tea, its warmth seeping through the porcelain into my hands. The Maple Street house was quiet but not empty. Ruth's quilt still hung across the sofa inside, its patches worn soft from years of use. Her Bible rested on the end table, a bookmark tucked between psalms. I let the silence settle, not heavy anymore, but calm. Emma, my neighbor's granddaughter, biked past on the street, waving as her laughter carried with the crunch of tires over leaves. Mrs. Bennet appeared with another pie, setting it on the porch rail. "For you," she said simply. There was no pity in her eyes, only respect. I sat back in Earl's old chair, the wood groaning the way it always had. For so long I had feared being erased, my devotion twisted into greed. But Ruth had given me more than a house or savings. She had given me recognition, proof that love doesn't vanish in silence. Family will gossip, relatives may twist stories, but truth is quieter, steadier. It sits in hospital rooms at midnight, in grocery lines with coupons, in the creak of a porch chair when the day is done. I sipped my tea and let the peace settle deeper. Ruth's final gift wasn't the house. It was the reminder that dignity can't be written out of a will. She gave me more than property. She gave me back my place.